Disclaimer. Other than myself, as the living being operating in both a private and public capacity simultaneously, and this podcast itself, which also operates in both a private and public capacity simultaneously and is owned and operated exclusively by myself, any product, service, and or entity discussed, displayed, and or somehow given attention on this podcast is not and has never been an endorsement, advertisement, support, or any kind of validation for its existence in any capacity, nor at all intended to at all facilitate its continued existence in any capacity. I mention things on what I consider to be an as-needed basis to fulfill what I consider adequate as evidence in my best attempt to prove the reality of who I am and what this podcast is attempting to achieve, to clearly demonstrate what I consider to thoroughly substantiate my assertions. My fundamental intent in communicating in general through any means is not and has never been malicious in nature, but can, will, and should exert malicious influence upon anything operating with malice towards me and or this podcast, especially more so the more demonstrably I'm proving that malice exists. Any attempts to at all mitigate this effect that don't come entirely explicitly from myself in the form of releases on this podcast are, always have been, and always will be in reality occurring entirely against my consent and should never be rewarded whatsoever. There's absolutely no real evidence to at all prove otherwise. I do not, never have, and never will at all consent to relinquishing, surrendering, abandoning, trading, selling, or somehow being deprived of my birthright to possess and exercise my free will and what effectively becomes the writing and living of the story of my life. This includes but is not limited to any claims I traded, sold, and or gave away any rights to use, modify, distribute, copy, sell, and or reproduce it somehow. This applies not only to this podcast, but also any other communication I've ever done. There's absolutely zero real evidence to prove otherwise, and any attempts to communicate otherwise are objectively incorrect and should be treated as operating fully consciously and intentionally entirely against my consent and with absolutely unconditional, unrestrained, malicious intent towards me in ever doing so at all at any point in time. I am not and never have been attempting to represent anyone's views other than my own. I do not and never have claimed that my views aren't extremely, if not completely accurate interpretations of objective reality. I do not, have never, and will never consent to at all be held liable for anything I release here or that I've ever said to my mailing list in the past, causing any kind or extent of loss, injury, harm, death, or any other negative or undesirable consequences to any entity, particularly if such occurred demonstrably effectively more or less entirely beyond my control and or as an objectively extremely justified consequence of others' objectively extremely unjustified behavior towards me. I'm not, never have been, and never will be trying to blackmail any entity, nor at all enable, facilitate, and or validate the blackmailing of any entity, neither through anything I release on this podcast, nor anything else I've ever done. And there's absolutely no real evidence to at all prove otherwise. I do not, never have, and never will consent to it being at all considered to be me or any entity operating at all with my consent or best interests regarding any communication somehow claiming and or implying that I somehow do ever have and or ever will unofficially support any kind of position at all contradictory with what I've said on this podcast. I've always wanted and done my very best to ensure it's extremely clear that at all creating, enabling, and or facilitating the perpetuation of narratives at all in contradiction with my official position that is objectively extremely clearly established on this podcast is not, never has been, and never will be what I've been trying to achieve with this podcast or in general in any of my efforts at any point in time. In any case of clear, direct conflict between statements I've explicitly made across different releases on this podcast, the most recent of such, that being the one contained in the latest publicly visible release available containing such on this podcast, should be considered applicable. In such cases, only what is explicitly stated is at all applicable, and absolutely no implications should be assumed about any changes regarding any somehow relevant details or anything else under any circumstances. This release and all other releases on this podcast are not and never have been sponsored at all, neither directly nor indirectly. I still have not ever received any compensation or reward of any kind whatsoever for any of my efforts at all involving the conflict being addressed by this podcast, neither directly nor indirectly from any source. I am, always have been, and always will be absolutely unconditionally unwilling to ever at all accept any compensation or reward whatsoever, directly or indirectly, that at all compromises my integrity, whether directly or indirectly. This podcast is an extremely and completely accurate and authentic representation of me and my life and my feelings in real life, and is not, never has been, and never will be role-playing or for entertainment. It also is not, never has been, and never will be me flirting at all with anyone. I've created the entirety of this podcast under life circumstances of completely unjust, increasingly blatant, extremely legally facilitated, extremely malicious, extremely life-threatening, extreme disrespect, neglect, defamation, exploitation, and deprivation I've described in extremely meticulous, immense detail in public extremely consistently, despite the extent I've irrefutably exposed the truth surrounding a conflict that should have been so extremely obviously recognized as extremely serious to the point that my efforts on this podcast should have made a substantial difference in my life long ago. My life circumstances continue to not have meaningfully or clearly improved at all whatsoever, especially due to the extent of egregiously blatant criminal activity being inflicted on me. I'm effectively, by definition, experiencing terrorism that I've demonstrated irrefutably presents premeditated murderous intent towards me, to the extent that considering it anything less than conspiracy to murder me is definitely objectively inaccurate. This podcast is not intended as an endorsement of terrorism or violence in general. However, it should be especially carefully understood that various forms of not necessarily corresponding violence tend to be an inevitable consequence of extremely intense, meticulous, extensive, prolonged terrorism, and it's very much intentional for this podcast to demonstrate extremely clearly that my usual aversion to violence due to my typically gentle nature is not something that has boundless understanding, patience, empathy, or will persist more or less absolutely unconditionally for any reason. This is especially relevant to if the extreme terrorism and violence being inflicted on my existence persists more or less as it has been, or gets even worse somehow. Further, it should be understood that any situation where I continue not to extremely clearly receive any compensation or reward I'm willing to accept is effectively, absolutely, unconditionally an increase in the severity of that terrorism and violence. I do not have and have never had any obligation or debt of any kind to any entity to create or release anything on this podcast or anywhere else at any point in time, nor have I ever at all consented to any communication claiming I've ever held positions contradictory with that which I state on this podcast. Any claims otherwise should be treated as intentionally malicious towards me and always having been occurring entirely against my consent and to my detriment, especially as there is definitely absolutely zero real evidence to prove otherwise. I create the entirety of everything I say on anything I've ever released on this podcast, just like every message I've ever sent to my mailing list in the past, and absolutely nothing and nobody other than me, living or non-living, deserves any credit for any of it. And there's absolutely zero real evidence to at all prove otherwise. Any even so much as attempt at all to somehow communicate otherwise in any of these regards and or in regards to anything else I've ever addressed on this podcast, especially without any real irrefutable evidence extremely clearly, explicitly, directly mentioning me specifically, while being extremely clearly, publicly presented, that does not depend on me being silent about it or in general on this podcast in order for it to retain any meaningful weight, and even more so especially without any real irrefutable evidence extremely clearly publicly presented that it's been brought to my attention extremely clearly in direct communication with me by an entity with an actually meaningful, discernible, identifiable, real life existence. And I didn't refute it. Absolutely, unconditionally, irrefutably, demonstrably is and always has been completely incorrect and absolutely unconditionally should be treated as being intentionally, completely, knowingly, extremely malicious towards me to ultimately an extremely life-threatening extent. It is very much intentional for this podcast to demonstrate beyond any even remotely reasonable doubt that such is and always has been in reality inflicted on me by others knowingly, entirely against my consent and to my detriment, which has been fully, knowingly, and intentionally sustained with demonstrable, premeditated, murderous intent to such an irrefutably extreme extent that this podcast serves as irrefutable evidence. It should be considered at the very least conspiracy to murder me, if not even more so, attempted murder of me by any substantially significant entity involved.
And actually, I was thinking about it, and I really like bland foods. Like, I love bland foods. I don't really like adding too much flavor or salt, or I don't know. I'm a psychopath. But I didn't realize that I would have low sodium.
I find it quite curious now that on multiple occasions both Kimmy and Jamie seem to only ever really show any recognition of their psychopath status in relation to or as a result of their diet or food preferences. But to me, that's hardly, if at all, a true indicator of whether or not someone's truly a psychopath, and I've never said or done anything that should even remotely adequately indicate otherwise to anyone. There's absolutely zero real evidence to at all prove otherwise. Also, anyone involved simply vaguely admitting to being a psychopath for any reason, while effectively continuing to refuse to do anything actually clearly beneficial to me, does not, never has, and never will appease me, force me to shut up, change my position, or offer anyone any leverage over me. While I recognize that watching content that has a familiarity aspect to it, like being from a content creator you've followed for years, has the potential to regulate your nervous system and have some kind of positive effect on your mood and whatnot due to a sense of predictability or some kind of sense of stability it might give you for whatever reasons, that's also offset by several factors, mainly their desire and willingness to intentionally inflict emotional distress on you, especially in an extremely devious manner that makes it extremely difficult for you to try to operate or live your life without looking like you have some kind of extremely serious mental illness for whatever reaction or response you might have to their content, especially if it doesn't entirely serve them at your detriment or doesn't fully or largely align with whatever kind of reaction or response they were likely hoping to get from you, with complete disregard for your own desires you've made exceedingly abundantly clear to them you fully, rightfully deserve to have satisfied. So I find it quite disingenuous if Kimmy's trying to suggest I should praise her for whatever aspect of familiarity her content provides, even despite the fact that she remains to this day being so extremely awful in how she treats me that I'm literally about to formally sue her and pretty much certainly also ultimately press extremely serious criminal charges on her after as well. Also, while I certainly prefer generally kind and gentle words, sentiments, and tone over any kind of negative, harsh, or aggressive ones, I want it to be extremely clear that I have absolutely no need to hear any kind of reassurance from Kimmy or anyone else about anything. My point being that it does not, never has, and never will appease me, force me to shut up, change my position, or offer anyone any leverage over me. Absolutely no part of what I'm doing with this podcast is in any kind of need of receiving any kind of words of affirmation from anyone for anything. I've been repeatedly making it extremely clear what kind of result I actually want, and no amount of vague praise from Kimmy and or anyone else really does anything useful for me at all. I found it quite strange how Kimmy felt the need to mention Botox, so I should perhaps mention that I do not, never have, and never will want and or need Kimmy and or anyone else to get Botox anywhere. It will never appease me, force me to shut up, change my position, or offer anyone any real leverage over me at all for anyone to get Botox at all. I've also never given anyone any even remotely adequate reason to believe otherwise, and any attempts to communicate otherwise are blatant lies with absolutely zero real evidence to at all prove otherwise. I also find it quite strange that Kimmy decided to go off on some weird tangent about supposedly making a friend that's normal less than a year ago. So at some point, likely not very long after I started this podcast, I really don't think Kimmy sees growing some kind of strong bond with and or dating some effectively rather mediocre individual she's probably giving rather catered biased information about her life to as some kind of huge win against her haters. So I highly doubt she seriously was trying to make implications going in the direction of seriously suggesting she'd prefer to date whoever that friend is over me. While I perhaps sensed some kind of energy shift in Kimmy since the very beginning, I really don't know what she was on about with saying her eyes look empty and sad. I never thought her eyes look empty and sad in any of her content. That sounds to me like some extremely strange, confused narrative appeasing she's doing because she's likely being basically terrorized by one or multiple individuals likely trying to coerce, blackmail, threaten, or somehow pressure her into not really being authentic in how she lives her life. And whoever it is, it's definitely not me. I know that much. I don't find any comfort in any sense of my feelings being related or validated through Kimmy saying that, nor through her possibly actually perceiving herself like that. And absolutely nobody has ever had any even remotely adequate reason to believe otherwise. Anyone at all attempting to communicate otherwise is blatantly lying entirely against my consent to my detriment with absolutely zero real evidence to at all prove otherwise. And how Kimmy talked about being available to those at work, to me it suggests it's likely one or multiple of her associates, and I'd say that's rather substantiated with some of the things I'll be addressing and exposing later on in this release. It really doesn't matter at all to me if Kimmy hasn't had a normal job in a long time. I've never been trying to devalue her or anyone else's efforts through what is effectively a professional career simply because it's atypical. Let's get something clear. I don't make small steps through my efforts on this podcast. I'm not trying to be slow about how I progress my life into the kind of state of abundance I deserve. Taking the time necessary to strategically calculate things and make sure I'm extremely deeply in tune with my emotions every step of the way as I produce a total energetic output of extremely high quality isn't taking it slow. It's making sure I'm staying fully authentic to myself and my desires and living my life with no regrets while also keeping an extremely deep awareness of the bigger picture. Accordingly, I'm not demanding results with the desire or expectation that they should or will come slowly. In fact, despite what the time in between my releases might seem to indicate to others, I get extremely angry, sad, upset, and disappointed when I don't see the kind of result I want immediately. I really want this to be extremely clear. I'm seriously not having fun at all with the life circumstances I've been left in, and I find it extremely annoying all the attempts many are making to derail me from a path fully aligned with my integrity and authenticity. I do not, never have, and never will at all appreciate any of such attempts. And this extends far beyond just Kimmy's publicly visible associates as well, in case there was any uncertainty about that. Multiple times now, I've seen Kimmy show what seems to basically be insecurity about her appearance recently because her spraining her back a while back has led to her being less able to regularly exercise and therefore gaining some weight. I don't find Kimmy's body any less attractive, and she could even probably gain a bit more weight and only become even more physically attractive to me, especially since it'd likely largely go to her hips, thighs, and butt areas. I certainly don't find being obese attractive, but Kimmy's nowhere near that, and I wouldn't even call her fat. I wouldn't call her fat even if she gained some weight from her current weight. I've never been trying to hold her or anyone to the typical beauty standards in society where being what I'd consider sickly thin is seen as sexy. It's only a bonus to me if Kimmy's even happier having a bit more weight on her that already only made her even more physically attractive to me, if anything anyways. Anyone at all attempting to communicate otherwise is blatantly lying with absolutely zero real evidence to at all prove otherwise. But all that said, there's something probably a lot more important for me to address than all of that. This happened on Kimmy's prior stream, which happened a few days after my 35th release on this podcast.
It says Dexon said that future details regarding this classic world will be shared in the second half of 2025. That is very exciting. I'm not going to lose my life to this game. Surely not. Surely. I am you're going to be on Discord. You're, me, the guild leader. Celine. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Bro, I'm gonna be so honest. When Classic Maple Story comes out, I already know I'm gonna make a guild. I'm gonna make a whole freaking Discord for my guild. And I'm just gonna be like on Discord 24/7 with Celine. Literally, just if you guys, I'll probably be streaming like 400 hours the month that gets released, so RIP. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna have to make it a goal to make my candle business a self-running system at that point. Or maybe we can just fulfill all the orders on stream.
And then this happened on Kimmy's stream that happened shortly after my last release on this podcast.
How is Celine? She's doing good. She just needs some time and space right now. Existing on the internet is difficult mentally, and I think some space is needed at times when you need it.
So Celine went from making her presence known as she talks in Kimmy's Twitch chat to Kimmy saying that Celine needs time and space all of a sudden. I've already made some statements about my perspective on Celine in the past. My feelings towards her haven't changed, and they aren't going to. I was left in a situation where Celine effectively forced me to have to call her out for her extremely deviously harmful behavior towards me in the form of pressuring her to embrace some kind of supposed feelings towards me. She seemed to be trying to block me from the connection I wanted with Kimmy by claiming she had towards me, as she tried to make herself seem like she was more suitable for me, and as if I was being extremely fake and just trying to harm both her and Kimmy if I didn't give Celine a chance she supposedly so badly wanted. Then she immediately made a complete mockery of it and made it extremely evident to me that she was just being an extremely fake narcissist, trying to hate on me and give me the hardest possible time and sabotage my connection with Kimmy all along. Even now, she's repeatedly demonstrating attention-seeking behavior every chance she gets, that she thinks she can see any kind of weakness in my position. But she fell right into the trap I strategically set to expose her and others like her. The moment she thought my position couldn't be maintained in both a public and private capacity, she thought she owned me. She thought she could just pop up in Kimmy's chat and bring attention to herself and try to trigger me into jealousy and behaving like a pathetic loser and force me to have to go begging her for attention or help or making an idiot of myself, raging out at her or something like that. Wrong. Let the record show I've only further substantiated my claims and why Celine is now an additional party I'll be adding to the lawsuit that I was originally only going to file against Kimmy and Jamie. It seems the main perpetrator of the terrorism Kimmy's been facing at work when dealing with her connection with me is Celine. She extremely viciously exploited my lack of clear knowledge of the reality of what was happening behind the scenes all these years with subhuman filth from my past, intentionally hiding things from me and trying to betray me extremely badly in an extremely and entirely undeserved manner to try to control me and Kimmy by making me look like I was intentionally trying to hurt Celine and or lying about my lack of feelings for Celine when I refused to show any interest in her or any real or persistent desire or willingness to at all pursue her despite her physical appearance being substantially similar to Kimmy's. It seems to me that Celine's been extremely jealous that I've always had so much love for Kimmy and genuinely find Kimmy incomparably physically attractive and also feel drawn to Kimmy beyond just physically as well. I get the sense that Celine's been talking extremely poorly of me to Kimmy behind the scenes and trying to sabotage me publicly and privately in an extremely devious manner for many years, while also basically trying to copy me anytime I did something that she in reality extremely clearly realizes proves her extremely negative attitude and behavior towards me as extremely grossly inappropriate. But again, I'm really not trying to lash out at Celine and effectively lower myself down to the kind of level it seems she's been operating at. After doing some more thinking and research, I came across what I consider to be a rather suspicious video of Jamie and someone called Jason, who's known online as Jason the Ween. I'd never even heard of him before until he was mentioned in the stream I addressed on the 35th release on this podcast, where the way Jackson talked about Jason left me with the impression that they were close. At the time, I really didn't know what kind of dynamic Jamie, Emaine, Jackson, and Jason all really have with each other. I wanted to be cautious with accusing anyone of anything, and I assumed that since I've never really seen much reason to believe Jamie and Emaine are particularly close before, they ended up collaborating there for whatever reason, but Emaine doesn't consider Jamie someone who she feels particularly close to. And then I saw this.
Put like 3, it'll be like
There's no way I can eat all this.
1,600. So you need to finish, right?
Yeah. I
How
mean,
much
I
time do
don't
you
need to
have?
finish today. I just need to finish, or not finish right now.
Oh, you mean like tonight?
By whenever
Oh,
I
okay.
get
I'm
extra.
gonna make this
I'm going
more
to Paris.
chill then. You're going to Paris?
Yeah, with Pokey.
With Pokey? Are you gonna press her too?
You want me to press her?
No!
I mean, like, hey, Jamie said she want to get back for what happened on that stream.
She's not gonna believe you.
Believe me about what?
She knows I wouldn't say that. Me and Pokey are like this,
I know, which is
and you and
why.
Jackson are like this.
That's why these conversations can happen.
So, at least as far as Jamie's willing to publicly express, apparently Jamie and Emaine are really close. Meaning that if I've demonstrably proven Jamie's extremely heavy involvement in defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, coercion, and conspiracy to murder me, then it's pretty much certain that Emaine is also in reality extremely heavily involved. It makes that collaboration stream I previously addressed look much more incriminating for both Jamie and Emaine, and even makes me start feeling a little weary about Jackson. But I'm still quite inclined to see Jackson as having been put in an extremely difficult spot and having been manipulated and possibly even coerced behind the scenes to involve himself. And even Jason seems like he might have been dragged into this without knowing really what he was getting himself involved in. So I took a further look into some of Jason's recent Twitch streams, particularly where Jamie and or Emaine might be present. What I noticed was increasingly suspicious.
Adab's calling me. Oh my god. He's gonna confess to you. We're live. He's gonna confess to you. Yo, Adab, bro. Bro. Are you about to confess? In person?
I got breaking news, bro.
She's right here, bro. You can say it.
What's up, Pokey?
Hi,
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Chilling.
Go ahead, Adab. Come on, bro.
He has news. Let him talk.
Yeah, listen, Jason, something that just came across my desk, bro. You know Gunner?
Yeah.
Turns out he's a criminal.
What?
Turns out he's a criminal. He's a Pokemon, well-known Pokemon scammer. He's stolen a bunch of shit from different trading companies. And the whole, I'm a nice guy, genuine, here, take this. It was all an act to try to get close to us, to try to dismantle us from the inside. I'm not even trolling.
But he gave me a Jeremy Lin card.
Calculated. He's trying to gain your trust and win the chat over. But I'm looking at a full-blown video this guy made. He's like the CoffeeZilla of the Pokemon community, showing that he's been.
I love CoffeeZilla.
Scamming. So we may be caught up in Rico here.
I bet. Let's go back to that store one day, and then Gunner's gonna pull up, and then we gonna put him on his neck, bro.
I hit him up and I asked asked him what he's doing to try to give him a chance to talk for himself, but I haven't heard back from him. I just feel like I had to loop you in, bro. Because he gave you Jeremy Lin card, right?
Yeah.
That shit might be stolen goods. You might have been, you
Holy
might have implicated
shit.
yourself. But you didn't take it, right? You just left it at the store, I feel like.
I definitely took that Jeremy Lin card.
Okay.
It's definitely in my room right now.
You flew across the country with contraband.
No. It's in my room at home.
Fuck, man. It's going to be bad. They're going to pull this up in court.
No. Allegedly, though. But, you want to tell me what you told... Wait, you want to tell Pokey what you told me off stream? When we were doing that, when we were doing that truth or drink game?
What'd I tell you off stream?
I told you earlier, Pokey. He's shy right now.
What was that?
He told me that during the drinking game, you confessed that you wet the bed until you were 17 years old.
No, I said that you had a crush on her.
I wet the bed until I was 17. Listen.
Is that true? Because there's no shame, you know? Shit happens.
Listen, that is not true. I did not wet the bed until I was 17.
We all been there, bro.
Jason can't really be trusted. You know what I mean?
What?
He can't.
Why is that?
You're sure about your how hip you are to like everything he's got going on with
I heard he has a RICO case.
What?
That's just the beginning too, Pokey. Listen.
Really?
I've seen half of it.
What are you talking about,
That's
bro?
why when I saw that you guys were in Paris together for 3 days, I'm like, damn, like, shout out to her for being able to put up with dude for 3 days. That's a crazy little dude that you did.
Lil is crazy.
I'm a grown ass man.
Lil is crazy.
No, he's not. No, he's not even grown.
No, I'm grown as hell, bro.
I'm grown as hell.
I don't even grown. I don't think even.
Yo, bro, I'm gonna change my country road password.
I think he's
No,
growing.
please no, do not.
Yeah.
Do not.
Yeah, cause you keep pissing me off. I'm gonna change that password, bro.
Do not, bro. Listen. I digress.
Good
Listen,
boy.
I'm really happy that you're with Pokey, right? She's a great person. You're in great hands out in Europe, right? Paris. I guess it's in
Paris, yeah.
Right. She'll be able to take care of you and make sure you're good.
Thank you, bro. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Dad.
I'm excited to watch the streams, bro. But I gotta get to the bottom of this.
Yo, go press Gunner for me, okay? And make sure my Jeremy Lin card is safe, though. All right, I still want that shit.
I got you, bro. I got you.
All right,
Take care, bro.
peace.
Bye.
Later. Bye, Pokey.
Bye.
What an interesting dude.
Yo, I hope you're not like starting beef in phase. Like, I don't want people fighting over me, you know?
Nah, no beef. Gunner
Yeah.
is a card seller.
Oh, no, I know. I was talking about Adapt in case.
Oh! Nah. I don't know. You never know.
I want everyone to be friends or whatever.
Listen, we're all friends.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we're all friends. Yeah, nah. FaZe, hey, we might all be fighting for you. Oh, shit.
Oh. Who the fuck is all? Anyways. Wasn't today such a good day?
Yeah, it was a great day today.
And
Great
these
day
were
today.
Good.
This was good.
So, suddenly, Jason and Amin decided to recently go to Paris together and live stream, and Jason basically gets publicly exposed for being involved with someone who's a serious criminal, while for some reason being under the impression that the call he got was going to be his friend confessing to Amin. Well, that's quite a different outcome than what he appeared to be expecting. I've never heard of this Gunner person before, and I've certainly never at all gotten myself involved with him. I don't have any interest in or involvement with Pokemon cards in any capacity to any extent, at least certainly not at all knowingly or intentionally, and there's absolutely zero real evidence to at all prove otherwise. I also have no idea of any possible behind-the-scenes significance of Jeremy Lin, and I have no particular feelings towards him or anyone he associates with. I also have no idea or at all intentional involvement in how or why Jason received a Jeremy Lin card from that recently exposed criminal Pokemon card scammer Gunner. The fact that I'm quite certain at least one of the crimes committed against me would fall under a RICO case I'd likely ultimately be formally pressing criminal charges against my blood relatives regarding. And I've very recently talked about actually taking Kimmy, Jamie, and any other clearly relevant associates of theirs to court over all the injustices committed against me as well, which would naturally lead into exposing all the criminal cases that branch off from it as a result. I'd say it's reasonable for me to assert that RICO case they're talking about is probably somehow related to my efforts on this podcast, if not directly actually talking about a court case I myself am a party of. I really don't think it's a coincidence that Emaine happened to be right beside Jason while that happened, and that suspicion led me to watching Jason's following stream, where certain things I consider exceptionally suspicious and incriminating happened.
Do you see that big castle on the right?
Yeah.
Yes.
That used to be the jail of Maria Bonnet. Oh.
Apparently,
Yes.
Shot their head after.
yeah, they decapitated her.
Wait, what'd he do? I'm not good at history.
Me neither. Okay, he knows everything, but I don't know.
Was it because she was bourgeoisie or something?
Because she was
Very
the
rich?
queen. She was the queen, and she was buying too many dresses.
Yeah.
That's
She was
why.
spending too much.
Really? Damn.
It was like
So he died because he was spending too much.
would you call that like a
She was representing all the privileges of the
bourgeoisie?
aristocrats.
Yes.
Oh my.
So that's what happens when there's too much wealth disparity.
The wage gap. I hate that shit. I'm serious.
Not between men and women though. Between the billionaires and your average citizen.
I fucking hate rich people.
For real.
Oh my
Except
god.
us, we don't count.
No facts. Wait, what?
No, seriously.
No, we don't count. No facts.
Well, to me, there's a difference between like you're a billionaire and you can buy power, and like you're an immigrant who hustled and made enough for you and your future family. Like that's the
I
kind
like
of wealth
that.
I
I'm gonna
want
start using
everyone to
that
have. No, but it's kind of true, no?
one. It is true. I can't go and buy power.
Because here's the thing: these crazy wealthy people, like crazy wealthy, they want us to fight amongst ourselves. Because it benefits them. It diverts attention from them.
No, when I
Because they're the real problem.
if I become a billionaire, fuck buying power. I'm gonna become the president.
I will never become a billionaire. I ever have even an ounce of that amount of money, you give it away. Like, how are you even hitting the B point?
Shit, speak for yourself. Nah, I'm kidding.
No, genuinely. You guys you'll never see me with a B, because if I'm gonna just keep giving that shit away. I'll be like, Jason,
Hey,
shopping
nah,
spree,
she did
shopping,
she did take me shopping. Oh, voice crack.
shopping spree. Oh,
And look behind you. Can you see the obelisk behind the trees?
Ah, I see it.
During the revolution, the guillotine was at the same place as the obelisk. So
they
Marie
took
Antoinette-
off Marie Antoinette's head over there?
Exactly.
Wow. I respect it. Do you think someday we'll have a revolution like that in America? Right? It's getting there, right?
We've already had one.
Another one.
What's going on?
The wealth disparity is getting bad.
The wage gap. I hate that shit.
No wealth disparity.
Wealth disparity.
Wage gap is like between men and women. Men and women, we love each other.
Facts.
And we hate the rich. Anyways. Too much.
Aren't you the rich?
No! Like the
Pokey.
ultra rich, the ultra giga rich, the
You have to
unnecessarily
clarify. They're gonna clip that and it's gonna make you look bad.
rich. Oh,
You
The
gotta
ultra
say
giga
you gotta
rich.
say the billionaires.
the billionaires.
you are rich.
The Bezos.
You can't be saying that.
I am. I'm rich in friendship.
Yes. They're gonna get you.
I'm so sorry.
Pokey.
Thank you.
I'm trying to help you.
I'm sorry. I got a loose
It's
tongue.
already too
I've
late. They
been
clipped that.
yapping.
They put it on Twitter. You're cooked.
No, we're gonna add context.
We need a community note. It's GG's.
Please, community note me. Please, community note me.
I'm telling you.
Thank you. See, this is why I stream less. I can't be bothered.
You
like-
unintentionally put yourself in clips.
So do you.
No, I don't. Not in controversial ones.
Fair enough, fair enough. I
Clarify.
will no longer have opinions. Thank you.
No.
Thank
It's
you.
good to have opinions,
Thank you.
but
Yeah, but being like overly detailed, my brain like
who
doesn't.
gives a fuck
What?
about what other people think about your opinion?
No, I mean like prefacing every single opinion when you're already speaking within a certain context. Do you know what I mean?
You just gotta make sure
Yeah.
it doesn't sound like bad.
No, I get what you mean. I'm just not great at that. But maybe that actually worked to my benefit. Because then people clipped me and then more people knew.
Oh, you do that shit over! No, you're the one.
Nah, I really just be yapping too much. My bad. My bad.
Yeah, W focus.
Like, you get it.
I'm here
kinda.
with you.
You get it.
Listen, I'm telling you, I'm here with you.
You really get it. You got a controversial opinion?
Do I? Shit.
One.
I don't think I have
Not a single one? Chat, what do you guys think is his most controversial opinion?
I'm not a fence sitter. Fence sitter. Wait. I don't. Controversial take.
We fence sitters.
We are not fence sitters, bro.
The who, what, where?
He isn't able to form a strong opinion. LOL.
No,
Yo.
yes you can. Yes, you show them. Prove them wrong.
Bro, what do you want me to say? I'm not into politics like that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Can I start studying politics so I can start saying controversial things?
Honestly,
Listen, as I grow, I actually am more involved in the news. I started reading, if you didn't know.
you didn't read before?
No,
Like ever?
I just became literate.
Woo!
I used to get my news on TikTok. Now I started reading.
Hey, news on TikTok is better than no news. I don't keep up with politics so much, but I care a lot about human rights. And sometimes those two things overlap quite a bit, so it's important to be informed.
Facts.
I was thinking maybe, like, what if I could do something for chat, too? Wouldn't that be cool? No, but that's the thing, like, I don't know.
For chat? Man, fuck the chat.
You know what I've always wanted to do?
What's
So
up?
I've never watched Toy Story. And I wish there was like a massive... I could rent a theater, but I want to rent out a stadium and just invite people to watch Toy Story with me.
People.
You know?
So a,
Like my
a
chat.
stadium?
Yeah. I want to invite a bunch of y'all and we just all watch Toy Story together.
That
Arky
could go
can come.
horribly wrong.
Hey, I'm down.
Why?
Because you never know who's in this chat. You know, they can endanger you, Pokey.
I'm sure they're all nice. Right,
Oh.
chat?
Oh, no.
Watch, they're all
Pokey,
gonna
I'm
say
gonna tell
yes.
you right now, you gotta be safe, okay? Your life is valuable. And if something happened to
Nah,
you,
it's
I
fine.
would get
They're
hurt.
all nice.
Listen,
at 'em.
you never know,
They
okay?
said yeah.
90%, 95%
Yeah.
of these people could be nice, but
Look
the
at the
5% could be
smileys.
murderers for all you know.
No.
All right, you gotta value your life because I value your life.
Hear me out. Theater, invite chat, but you don't let in the Scorpios. Except Arky.
Yeah.
Then we're safe.
Shit, I don't fuck with Aries either.
Oh,
Just
shit.
kidding. I don't even know what that means. We made it back. We made it back, chat.
What I see is Imaine blatantly exposing herself for having been abusing divination extremely extensively to exploit my energy and efforts for years and contribute to the conspiracy to murder me, trying to enslave me to facilitate her own personal battles and abusing my energy to attack extremely powerful billionaires with it entirely against my consent to my detriment, while giving me effectively absolutely nothing I'd ever actually want in return. I see she's still to this day trying to facilitate my subhuman filth blood relatives to perpetuate these extremely life-threatening circumstances in my life. Toy Story is a movie I've always considered really mediocre. My biological brother really liked it as a child, and my biological parents knew that very well. My criminal scumbag biological Uncle John must have gotten this information somehow as well, and I've even been hearing he's been lying in some court, claiming that he gave me certain mail that in reality he never gave me. He's never given me any mail intended for me in my entire life, and he should be treated as fully consciously and intentionally completely lying with absolutely unconditional, unrestrained, malicious intent towards me, and likely also several others simultaneously if he's ever claimed otherwise. I really don't know or particularly care how deep Jason's involvement in this whole thing is, but it seems he's been exposed as intentionally sitting on the fence here or refusing to take any kind of decisive stance on the reality of the conflict that I'm exposing with this podcast. But that will just make his life a worsening nightmare if he's attempting to somehow exploit me and violate my boundaries endlessly through others attempting to do so to me anyways. So I won't worry too much about it right now. I'm not trying to attack him too hard because I feel like he also didn't know what he was really getting himself involved in and has become another victim of offline TV and friends' extremely malicious attitude and behavior towards me, similar to how they manipulated Jackson into getting involved in all this. Perhaps much more importantly, I want it to be extremely clear that I'm not, never have been, and never will be attempting and or willing to tolerate Imaine and or anyone else at all trying to exploit my energy or any of my efforts, whether on this podcast or otherwise, to give any extremely financially abundant and or otherwise extremely powerful entity any kind of attention they haven't made extremely abundantly evident they objectively actually desire and deserve to receive. I feel like Jason repeatedly saying wage gap instead of wealth disparity isn't a coincidence, and I can't help but feel like it must be some kind of indication that Imaine has some kind of tendency to manipulate conflicts into becoming some kind of sex and or gender divide issue to distract from the real matters at hand. Like I've said before, I hardly know anything about Imaine, and I neither consider her any kind of friend to me, nor have followed her online activity very closely at all in all the time I've ever known of her existence. If she exploits the wage gap and or factors influencing it somehow, I don't know about and aren't interested in the dynamics of that at all. I never have been. As far as the extremely rich billionaires kind of people Imaine mentioned, there are two major kinds of such people. Those that exist functioning in a state of having effectively quite comfortably intentionally faked their death and living in a system entirely separate from what the average person sees or interacts with, and those that have not. I have no want or need to explicitly mention or attempt to prove the existence of any of the former, and the latter have several rather obvious and widely known examples, none of which I myself feel any particular want or need to explicitly mention currently either. While I might perhaps have things to say about such entities in the future, I currently wish to stay focused on this conflict I'm currently suffering extremely badly in with Kimmy and her associates, and what will become either proceeding with formal legal action in the near future or receiving direct communication from Kimmy before then. As far as the former group of elites, it's simply extremely stupid in almost every conceivable situation to even mention their names while trying to expose them, even if you're aware of them and have evidence. Typically, you don't really stand to gain anything unless you're an extremely unhinged maniac with extremely serious mental illness and a death wish, and perhaps likely desire to join them on what I'd imagine likely involves heavily criminal and immoral demonic activities that I imagine include blood sacrifices of various kinds and likely also extremely disturbing acts with children, none of which are things I have ever involved myself with or want to involve myself with ever. Such powerful people have worked so hard to isolate themselves from the masses that it becomes an immense spiritual attack towards them for anyone substantially influential to even mention them like that. And if you aren't very close or greater in power, it's likely going to result in actual physical death for you very quickly to disrespect their power. Like I said, I'm not suicidal, and even if I don't like certain entities, I understand respect and power enough to watch what I say and do extremely carefully in relation to extremely powerful elites. As far as the billionaires the average person knows of still being alive, I don't have any particular issue with any of them as things are. Whatever amount they contributed to the suffering I've experienced, it's not something I want or feel the need to talk about. I will, however, applaud them for not choosing to fake their deaths and go engage in things with those that do fake their deaths as effectively a form of retirement, since it means they instead choose to still fight for truth and true balance in the world in at least some kind of meaningful capacity that likely to at least some extent ultimately benefits me and anyone else I might ever care about. While I can recognize and respect the power of the ultra-wealthy elites with access to billions of dollars, they're also not the ones publicly, actively, extremely aggressively, relentlessly inflicting defamation on me and trying to drag me into and trap me in their personal dramas entirely to my detriment, like Kimmy and her associates are. So I see the main trying to blame billionaires for this conflict as an extremely immature attempt to shift blame and avoid accountability for her clear, extremely heavy, fully conscious and intentional involvement in this conflict and the extremely brutal life circumstances I've been left in as a result. I've never been trying to act as a shield for others to attack billionaires for selfish gain while forcing me into extremely dangerous, deprived slavery. If Elaine was really in such a powerful position, or had such a serious problem with some billionaire where she wasn't trying to maliciously exploit my energy to facilitate selfish gain for herself, fully consciously and intentionally, entirely against my consent to my detriment, she would have started calling out specific names and reasons why she has problems with billionaires, not doing some extremely pathetic, virtue-signaling, extremely grossly hypocritical garbage like she did. If she herself feels so powerful, with absolutely no help from me, whether spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, physically, financially, or in any other means, then I've never been trying to stop her from exposing harm some billionaire might have done to her. But I refuse to enable her to bring harm to my life and or put me at any risk of harm because she feels entitled to having access to my energy or any of my resources in any capacity to any extent. If we're going to talk about amounts of money, how about I talk numbers in regards to further reasoning why I want the kind of connection I've always wanted with Kimmy. If I can't have a truly meaningful connection with Kimmy, who I've invested such immense time and energy into, then the reality is I'm never really going to have that kind of connection with anyone. And in that case, in some scenario where I was theoretically willing to compromise my integrity while adopting some kind of really wealthy status, I might as well just get an escort to be intimate with 24/7. Roughly speaking, that's going to cost at least about $200 an hour. So 24 hours is $4,800, or let's say she's even being generous and lowers it to $4,000 a day. Even at a substantial further discount, that's going to cost at least $1 million a year. And that's not counting the money I'd have to spend on her for food, shelter, clothing, and whatever other luxuries she might want or expect. I imagine it'd probably, in reality, come closer to at least $2 million a year, if not more. for someone I'd find less physically attractive than Kimmy and have absolutely zero real emotional connection with, and absolutely zero real desire or willingness to ever have a real emotional connection with. Even if I wanted a nice house, whatever food I want, and always having top-of-the-line, extremely expensive, powerful computers and cell phones, I'd never need anywhere even close to billions for my ideal lifestyle. I've never cared for an excessively financially indulgently spending lifestyle. I have no good or adequate reason to go out of my way to attack billionaires when I've never been trying to compete with them for that kind of financial resources in the first place. They all have their own issues to deal with and must have quite extremely sensitive energy they can't afford to waste aggressively attacking someone like me for what becomes no really worthwhile reason. If any billionaires really had some big problem with me, I have extreme difficulty believing they'd have been okay with me continuing to run a YouTube channel hosting this podcast for over a year when I post the kinds of releases I do. For Emaine to have any weight in trying to blame billionaires as any kind of substantial contribution to this conflict, she must be trying to suggest that the real issue here is Kimmy has been trying to directly contact me through every official method I've listed on my podcast's official YouTube channel, and the reason I haven't been receiving any of it is because all of those platforms and the extremely financially abundant entities that own them are actively trying to censor any actually clearly constructive direct communication between me and Kimmy that actually can lead to me achieving the kind of connection I've always wanted with her. But I find that, again, extremely difficult to believe. I don't think the real issue here is any billionaire. I think the real issue here is Kimmy and her associates, especially Jamie, Celine, and Emaine. Like, I've already even proven I've completely cut off all the subhuman filth from my past and have absolutely zero want, need, or willingness to at all ever entertain allowing any of them back in my life ever again. I've already extremely meticulously explained my reasoning and continue to see a complete lack of any real or even remotely objectively adequate evidence or reasoning presented by anyone to seriously even attempt to realistically invalidate my assertions about anything regarding anyone I've talked about. But I'm seeing Emaine extremely deviously, desperately trying to appease subhuman filth from my past, trying to get me murdered off of complete lies, while she's vaguely virtue signaling about billionaires instead of Kimmy directly contacting me, lovingly confessing feelings for me and desire for a serious, genuine, healthy, extremely frequently, tenderly intimate, sexually involved, in-person relationship with me that she wants and intends to last forever. While I certainly don't support any of the corruption or any degeneracy in general that ultra-wealthy elites engage in, I also have never been trying to aggressively attack any of them or totally dismantle the entire system down to the individual level of each highly prominent at-all malicious actor. I assert my dominance as a world leader and a permanent chief of the Shadow Confederation as a matter of my integrity and to exercise my rightful authority, and not really for any other reasons. Neither my integrity nor my rightful authority entail either an entitlement or a requirement of randomly, aggressively attacking the most powerful entities that exist unprovoked merely on the principle of not supporting extreme degeneracy in general. I, too, have my own battles and my own focus on surviving and trying my best to build a life I actually enjoy and find worthwhile. While I certainly would like the world to be a better place and have no issue with putting a non-trivial amount of effort into hopefully helping achieve that, I do not, never have, and never will want or be willing to adopt some exceedingly sacrificial, altruistic attitude of dedicating my entire existence solely to the betterment of humanity, or something like that. And I really don't think there's anything objectively wrong with that. As far as anyone who has an opinion that they don't like my attitude in this regard, guess what? I don't care. at all. It's that simple. I'll do good things if I want to, not because I feel the need to force myself because someone else feels entitled to expecting it of me for whatever reason. I also feel like I should perhaps address some other stuff that might be relevant. I've never questioned whether or not Kimmy is actually fully Korean, as she's always claimed from the very beginning I've ever known of her. I also have never been trying to give her a hard time because she doesn't really know how to speak the Korean language. I certainly wouldn't have had any issue with it if she did know how to speak Korean well. But I don't find her as any less attractive or ideal as a partner either way. I am not, and never have been, inspired by either Japanese or Korean aesthetics. I don't know if I'd even say I know much about Japanese aesthetics to begin with, but it never particularly struck me as minimalist from what I've seen of it. Which isn't something I consider a good or a bad thing, by the way. It's just my perspective on it that I'm saying from a completely neutral place on it. But anyway, I am not and never have been inspired by any aesthetic in particular, whether of an association with any particular ethnicity and or of any other thing. I've already mentioned that I find Korean women particularly physically attractive, especially women with bodies like Kimmy, and most of all, specifically Kimmy herself. But I wouldn't consider that being inspired by the aesthetic. It's simply a sexual preference of mine personally that I don't, never have, and never will even attempt to assert as some kind of objective standard of beauty. I find such an argument stupid and useless. I never particularly wanted to discuss sexual topics publicly in general, and certainly not publicly share so many intimate details of my sexual preferences how I've had to. But like I've said before, I won't be shy about it if that's what it takes to convince Kimmy of my feelings for her. But if you're going to see that as being inspired, I'd say that's much more so an indicator of me being inspired by my idea and perception of what love is than any particular aesthetic. Certainly, as far as this podcast goes, I wouldn't consider myself inspired by the aesthetic of anyone or anything, whether in the sense of purely visuals or in any other possible sense of the word. Like I've been saying, I never intended to end up doing a podcast at all, and everything I'm addressing is essentially being forced onto me to have to address, because otherwise I've literally just been unbelievably, extremely, brutally, essentially completely robbed of the last 8+ years of my life and literally left to die, as literally every person I've ever been at all close to in my entire life proves themselves to be completely irredeemable, subhuman filth that never actually loved or respected me at all, and in reality was constantly hiding things from me and betraying me at every turn, and many of which who I only see increasingly irrefutable evidence are actively involved in a conspiracy to murder me that persists increasingly egregiously, criminally, and irrationally to this moment. I want it to be extremely clear that I don't, never have, and never will have any want, need, or willingness to tolerate myself and or Kimmy ever adopting a let you go to find myself kind of attitude here, as if that's ever going to be a resolution to this conflict. To say it would hurt my feelings to be denied the connection I've always wanted with Kimmy is beyond just an understatement. I'm absolutely certain that my desire doesn't come from childhood trauma, and I honestly couldn't care less even if someone could somehow actually irrefutably, objectively prove that it does. I'll still always want what I want and like what I like all the same regardless, and never at all want or be willing to allow or tolerate any attempts to force change on me in this regard. I understand the concept of not transactionally doing things for someone with an expectation of something in return. But there's a clear line you have to draw, or that's how narcissists endlessly exploit you and drain you of every bit of your energy and rob you of your soul. I'm absolutely confident that it's entirely unreasonable to clearly, fully consciously, and intentionally get someone so extremely invested in you, like Kimmy has done to me, and then expect them to not expect to get a clear and adequate reciprocation and favorable outcome from you in return. You obviously don't love them at all if you do that to them, so you can't try to flip it on them and say they don't love you if you won't effectively reward them for what becomes the most extreme hatred you could ever demonstrate having towards them. If Kimmy's going to try to act like I'm being at all fundamentally, intentionally malicious and or fake from the beginning in demanding and expecting to immediately receive what I should be receiving in return for all I've done for her, as if getting what I want isn't something that she should have also wanted all along, then that's only further irrefutable evidence that I'm fully justified objectively in suing her, pressing criminal charges on her, and ultimately making sure I absolutely destroy her life and make her regret ever being born, as she has to live whatever would be the remainder of her existence of any kind in the most hellish nightmare of nightmares that it could ever possibly be.
Since it's really come to this, again going back to Kimmy's stream after release number 33 of this podcast, there's one additional person it seems has really been a substantial contribution to this conflict and the harm it's brought upon my life, who I'll also most likely add to the list of people I'll be pursuing formal legal action against in the near future if I don't receive direct communication from Kimmy shortly after I release this publicly on my podcast. There was this one part.
I have so much to update you guys on. Oh my gosh. Where do I even start? Oh man. Okay, let's start at Valentine's Day. So, I am guys, I have another job now. Fuck. I'm not just a streamer anymore. I have, okay, that was a joke, kind of a joke, but basically, during the week of Valentine's, I think that was last week, or like the week before last week, I hosted 2 candle making events, IRL, which means I bought a whole separate candle making setup, and I drove it over to my friend's house and invited over a bunch of friends, and I hosted a candle making event, girls' night. My friend Lena gave me this little art plushie during the candle making event as a gift, so that's why I am holding it right now. And it was, oh my gosh, okay, it was so much fun. Like, so this is the candle I made from my little Valentine's candle making event. I wrote Valentine's February 12th, 25, and it turned out orange, but that's because I put the wrong dye in. It was supposed to be light pink. I don't know how it turned out orange. This is a very refreshing scent. I made it smell like rosemary, mint, and bergamot.
I don't know what it means exactly, but I know there's most likely some kind of specific meaning behind it when people give Kimmy plushies. Kimmy's old favorite MapleStory character name, she's shown has had a substantial impact on her existence, even in real life, is plushies. So it seems Lena likely has been extremely deviously, almost maliciously exploiting narratives around MapleStory and Kimmy's involvement with the game to facilitate extreme exploitation of my energy and efforts and damage my reputation entirely against my consent, to my detriment. Again, Lena has absolutely zero real ability to appease me, force me to shut up, change my position, or offer anyone any real leverage over me. Again, I'm entirely uninterested in and unwilling to ever engage in flirting with her and or any kind of romantic and or sexual involvement with her. She seems to have been stalking me behind the scenes for quite some time without me having any awareness of it. Most likely, there's been criminal impersonation of me happening entirely against my consent and to my detriment, where some subhuman filth has been trying to make it seem like I have some kind of feelings for Lena and or some kind of secret connection with her, where in reality none exists. Naturally, there must be no actually real irrefutable evidence that there's any truth to all the defamation. I've literally never even heard of Lena Lemon until she randomly came into the lives of Kimmy and Jamie, to the point they were publicly giving her attention extremely suspiciously not very long after I started this podcast. The natural assumption to me would be that Lena herself is a massive scumbag subhuman filth that's been either herself spreading and or intentionally somehow else purporting egregious lies about me that she was always in reality fully aware were such in order to get herself attention entirely against my consent, to my detriment. I mean, there's gotta be some reason it's been happening. And think about who it'd ultimately benefit for some random person I have absolutely no interest in or involvement with to be getting a ton of attention by exploiting my energy entirely against my consent and to my detriment. Clearly, it benefits that person by far and large more than anyone else. So who'd be more reasonable to consider the primary suspect than the person themselves? And there's clearly been intentional cooperation with that energy from Kimmy when it's reached the point Lena is communicating that Kimmy is goated, in her eyes, for whatever involvement she's had in betraying me to facilitate unfair gain for Lena against my consent, to my detriment. So that's why I consider Lena one of those now that I'm quite certain I'll be suing and ultimately pressing criminal charges against. Anyone that knows what deeper meaning Lena giving Kimmy a plushie means most likely can only further solidify and provide some kind of confirmation that I'm correct in having this attitude, although I have no idea how I'd go about getting such confirmation. I don't suck up to anyone for them to feel compelled to tell me, and Kimmy probably strategically refrains from exposing her own involvement as much as possible, given that it only further exposes her as well for having been knowingly malicious towards me all along. But it doesn't matter that much to me. If part of why people feel entitled to see me as shady or fake is because of what is effectively completely unsubstantiated claims that I have some kind of involvement with Lena, when in reality I know I don't, then that complete lack of real proof, combined with knowing I've been getting discriminated and ostracized over it, certainly would be something that Kimmy wouldn't be able to justify in a formal courtroom. So if she really wants to push me there, we can really go there, and like I said, she will lose. Extremely badly. For various reasons of things I've noticed in my energy, I suspect that Lena is either getting fully conscious and intentional consensual support from, or blackmailing, coercing, and or otherwise manipulating Stephen, known online as Destiny, through extremely deviously, extremely heavily political rhetoric somehow, to assist Lena in the existential attacks she wants to inflict on me to attempt to extremely narcissistically control my life entirely against my consent, to my detriment. I currently suspect that Stephen is much more so a victim in this regard and is likely either facing a blackmail and or coercion scenario or simply being extremely deviously manipulated through the immense web of lies Kimmy and her associates have spun and facilitated Lena to spin, to try, to trap, and deprive and conspire against me. I don't really involve myself with politics nearly enough that I'd care for engaging Stephen publicly in some kind of debate on political ideology, and I don't see him as a friend or see any even remotely adequate reason to feel any real inclination to see him as any extent of an ally to me. So he's going to have to figure out that whole mess on his own, just from what I post publicly on this podcast as far as any input from me goes. If I do not receive direct communication from Kimmy in the very near future, not only am I going to be suing and ultimately pressing criminal charges on Kimmy and Jamie, but also Celine and Amy, and probably also Lena as well. I'm going to say this even more clearly in case anyone that still insists on treating me like a pushover fraud, moron, loser, weakling didn't understand it the first time I said it when I was being more polite about it. Anyone trying to guilt trip me or gaslight me by trying to twist what I'm doing as some kind of blackmail or anything illegal or immoral, or even simply intentionally trying to misrepresent my position as indecisiveness, fakeness, or some kind of obsession with politics, kill yourself. I'm seriously not trying to achieve any ulterior motives, and I've seriously never been showing any warmth to Kimmy for any reason besides purely out of the kindness of my heart that I genuinely, fully, authentically wanted to, because I've been sincere this entire time about everything, and I really, really, really would rather not have ended up having to sue Kimmy and what clearly is only becoming a larger and larger group of her associates for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress, and ultimately also press criminal charges on them for, at the very least, criminal coercion and conspiracy to murder that I'm only becoming increasingly convinced my blood relatives and likely also other people from my past have been heavily involved in, which Kimmy and her associates knowingly worked with to facilitate and exacerbate and continue to perpetuate in my life to this day. Since many have attempted for many years to paint me as some extremely indecisive, unstable, unintelligent, fundamentally mean-spirited fraud who's basically a massive narcissist, psychopath, piece of garbage, subhuman filth, while they in reality were projecting all their garbage attributes onto me, I find it appropriate to more thoroughly prove my integrity and how serious I am about following through with this if things are really going to be like this. So let me explain what someone in the kind of position I'm facing has to do when dealing with proceeding with formal legal action against what seems to only be a growing number of subhuman filth that have irrefutably, demonstrably exerted extreme malice towards me, who also largely have immense influence and resources in multiple regards, which they obviously intend to continue to only in reality try their absolute hardest to leverage to utmost maliciously coerce, abuse, exhaust, and deplete me into silence and self-destruction with. Because as broken as the system is, even someone in such an extremely deprived position as me can still actually successfully sue and win against even enemies like that if I care enough. And you'd best believe I do. I'm not going to give specifics like where exactly I'll be searching for attorneys, but I want it to be extremely clear that it's not because I don't know where to look. I'm intentionally being strategic in the information I share publicly because there's just no good reason for me to give any more specific information that my enemies might be able to more proactively attempt to weaponize against me somehow. I've already started looking and know multiple places I can look. I'd certainly rather not potentially cause any attorneys to get harassed or potentially preemptively approached by my enemies in what would otherwise likely be aggressive attempts to sabotage my efforts. I've started looking, but decided it would be best to refrain from actually reaching out to any until after seeing if Kimmy might decide to directly communicate with me in the very near future after this release, instead of really fully committing to being the worst of enemies against me forever, and inevitably dooming herself and her associates to an absolutely unconditional, extremely brutal, irrecoverable, complete cancellation, and most likely, at least in some cases, complete destruction of their entire lives. If Kimmy really pushes me there, I'm not sure exactly how long it'd take me to receive responses, but the first thing to note is that I'm certainly not going to only reach out to one attorney at a time. I'd start spending several hours daily looking through countless attorneys to find any that seemed like they might be suitable, and reaching out to many within a relatively short period without waiting for a response. I imagine many simply wouldn't even respond for whatever reason, or they'd take so long to respond that I'd consider the considerable delay in response already too much of a red flag for me to consider proceeding with them anyways. Looking for an attorney based in Los Angeles has some advantages, since Kimmy, Jamie, Celine, and Amin all live there and have done much of their wrongs against me from there. An attorney based there may be more knowledgeable about specific laws of the area, which can be beneficial since a lawsuit against them likely is suitable to follow through within a court in Los Angeles. However, I don't plan on limiting my search that much for two main reasons. First of all, I suspect this very well might end up being much more suited to pursue as a federal case. Second, I'm sure that regardless, there must exist many excellent attorneys across the United States who are still plenty capable and perhaps in some cases much more overall suitable for other reasons than necessarily ones just based in Los Angeles. Regardless, I definitely will be looking for an attorney based in the United States, although I live in Canada, because although state-specific laws are certainly an important consideration to be an area of expertise for my choice in terms of the state I'd perhaps prefer the attorney to be based in, I believe it's simply an extremely stupid decision for me to look for an attorney in my own country in this situation. I'm formulating a very strategic approach to reaching out to attorneys, so I still have to figure out all the smaller details as I work through the process. The more evident it becomes that it's truly going to be absolutely necessary and unavoidable that I have to go about things like that. But I'm well aware of all the major points I need to consider in my approach. Things like checking for conflict of interest, as in prior relationships or business dealings with who I'm suing or their associates, their experience dealing with cases involving charges and situations similar to what I'd be employing them because of, their approach to ethics and how they'd handle pressure from external parties, especially since my enemies have substantial influence and resources and would likely try to bribe them or exert pressure on them to give up on me and or betray me somehow. And I'd be paying close attention to if they're hesitant or avoid giving clear answers, give me advice that seems to be in favor of cutting corners or engaging in questionable legal tactics, or react defensively when I ask questions about things like their previous cases or personal connections. I'd cross-reference information I get with answers from different attorneys to be able to come to conclusions on things that AI can't really tell me, or merely studying law on my own would probably be way too slow to learn. Transparency in the fee structure is something I've had to make sure to be prepared to deal with, discussing and agreeing upon as well. More specifically, there are additional costs associated with taking formal legal action here that I'd need to make sure the attorney is also willing to cover initially, and we'd need to agree on exactly how and when that would be deducted from winnings. From what I've researched, apparently it can cost about $100 to $400 or more to officially file the initial paperwork. Then it takes about $50 to $150 more just to serve the paperwork formally to the defendants by someone called a professional process server. It can cost more if experts need to be brought in to testify on certain things and whatnot as the case would progress, but overall it seems to me like the only really mandatory cost I'd need the attorney to cover for me would likely be a few $100 at most. Given how much they stand to gain and the circumstances that put me in such a spot, I can't even afford that being only further evidence of everything I've been saying being true. I imagine it wouldn't be terribly difficult to find an attorney that'd be willing. After I'd find someone I can form an agreement with, I'd make sure we have a formal contract outlining all the relevant details of our arrangement, including things like the agreed contingency fee, breakdown of litigation costs, and how they'd be deducted from winnings, process for repayment of costs, and the timeline and process for settlement negotiations and potential trial. Considering that I plan to continue to document things publicly and make releases on this podcast in general as I see appropriate, we'd have to discuss and come to some kind of understanding and agreement on the scope of attorney-client privilege. There might be certain more sensitive things I'd have to intentionally refrain from sharing publicly, although I really don't know how that's all going to play out yet. I don't have any inherent issue with sharing as much as reasonably possible and maintaining the ability to have a substantial level of public transparency for my own safety and peace of mind, if not for any other reasons, is a requirement I'll have. But again, I doubt it'll be terribly difficult to find an attorney that I can talk it through with to reach an agreement on something we'd both be satisfied with.